circuit in Malaysia now for unrivaled coverage of the Grand Prix qualifying sessions. Your host, Jim Rosenthal.
Ferrari 1-2. Schumacher wins in Malaysia.
The Sepang F1 circuit outside Kuala Lumpur. No expense spared to produce a magnificent facility. It's the qualifying session for the Malaysian Grand Prix. Hello there. Good morning to you from our London studio. Very well done indeed for opening your eyes to join us at this hour. Tony Jardine's with me. Morning, Tony.
Morning.
Conditions in Malaysia, 32 degrees, humid but dry at the moment. Well, the first standings mirror the result of the opening Grand Prix in Australia. 10 points for the winner, Michael Schumacher. Montoya on 6. Raikkonen opening his McLaren account. Irvine lucks in with 3. Webber's 2. Pure gold for Minardi. And Toyota off the mark thanks to Salo. So unexpected scorers down under. Here's Ted Kravitz and Louise Goodman.
The sweltering heat here in Malaysia is in stark contrast to the conditions at the season opener 2 weeks ago. The Australian Grand Prix should have given us a reasonable indication of the state of play for 2002, but it rained on the first 2 days of practice, and then an incident at the start led to a top 6 which nobody could have predicted. The drama started even before the formation lap when flat batteries stranded both Arrows cars on the grid. So the field was down to 20 for the start of the race. Little did they know as the lights went out that only 12 of them would make it past the first corner.
Fantastic start by one of the Benzos. Ralph Schumacher challenges Barrichello. Michael Schumacher's got a poor start, but Ralph is motoring into second place and he hits Rubens Barrichello. Huge accident.
Total carnage. It started with Ralph hitting the back of Barrichello, flying into the air, and then everybody shunting behind in sympathy.
The onboard camera provides a spectacular view of the incident and seems to back up Schumacher's version of events. But not surprisingly, each blamed the other.
At the end of the day, you have to say, changing your line, so many times as he did, that was the main problem. If he would have stayed inside and braked at his pace, there wouldn't be any problem, because I would have been on the left side of him and we would have joined the corner next to each other, nothing else.
The stewards deemed it a racing incident, but it had put paid to any chance of racing for almost half of the field. The casualties included British drivers Jenson Button and Alan McNish, whose debut with the Toyota team was all too brief. Sauber drivers Felipe Massey and Nick Heidfeld, plus Giancarlo Fisichella and Olivier Panis, all faced a jog back to the pits.
So with the first lap mess all cleared up under a safety car, David Coulthard led away from Jarno Trulli, proving that Renault were once more a power to be reckoned with. The Italian soaked up all the pressure Michael Schumacher could throw at him before a nasty spin put him out at turn 2.
Oh, and he's lost it. Trulli's lost it on the exit, and that is surprising to see.
Apparently oil on the track, so I couldn't see it. It's a shame, but we really hope that we can get some more chance in the future.
Ferrari, meanwhile, continued to set the standard, even if their dominance in Melbourne was a bit misleading, as their rivals lost out on set-up time in the wet practice sessions. Michael Schumacher had an easy win in the souped-up version of last year's car. Ferrari's proven setups still on the money. The team is still using the 2001 chassis here in Malaysia, but back in Europe, the new car continues to test well. If it survives next week's reliability trials in Barcelona, expect to see it debut in Brazil. But talk of another championship walkover is being quashed.
Sport is unpredictable, basically, so whoever thinks it's an easy walk home to the championship, I don't think that's true. Motorsport goes very fast and it changes around very fast.
And how would you explain the advantage, the car advantage that you had in Australia?
Mainly due to some perfect Bridgestone tyres.
Michelin appeared to have been caught out by the unexpectedly cold temperatures in Melbourne, but that didn't stop Juan Pablo Montoya from putting up an entertaining battle against Schumacher for the lead. But David Coulthard was badly let down by his machinery. A niggling gearbox problem ultimately proved terminal. It was a much happier camp at Minardi, where Mark Webber scored the team's first points for 3 years, and at Toyota, 6th place finishers on their Formula 1 debut.
Playing this morning, Montoya quickest in morning practice. But Tony, what about the scrap, the continuing scrap between Messrs Barrichello and Ralf Schumacher?
Well, as you say, Jim, they have clashed before, but they seem to have a magnetic attraction because they've been so close. And specifically in that incident, one move, he did make that, but that was a defensive one there. Ralf was still upshifting apparently at the time, and Rubens said that at the same point as Michael Schumacher in the race the year before, he was 15 miles per hour faster, so he said that proves it. But they clashed in Malaysia, if you remember last year, when Rubens Barrichello had Ralf off, and Rubens hit Ralf again in Brazil. So that prompted the sign. You remember, keep clear at the back. That
Absolutely.
on the back at the
Absolutely. OK, well, those are 3 points for Eddie Irvine in Australia. Really camouflaged deep-seated problems at Jaguar. Remember, Irvine speechless when asked to explain the car's failings after finishing behind Mark Webber's Minardi in qualifying. So a crucial weekend for the car and the team in Malaysia.
What you see here behind us is a team in big trouble. The Jaguar R3 has proved to be a major handful ever since the car was first launched in January.
In a strange parallel to what Ferrari are doing further up the pit lane, the team is now seriously considering racing with last year's car until they get this year's model sorted out. So how did they get into this mess?
There was no testing in the winter, so we couldn't do anything. By the time we brought it onto the circuit, first day of testing availability, we had mechanical problems, so therefore we couldn't check our aero package. Now the mechanical problems are all solved, and now we realize that the aero package is not strong enough. And this is what we have to develop quickly.
The blame for this catalogue of woe has been put at the door of ex-team principal Bobby Rahal and ex-technical boss Steve Nichols.
It will be used against you.
There's now been 3 chief executive officers or team principals, and that is disruptive. It's disruptive to the people, and you have people coming and going. There's no stability. So I think where we are at the present time is almost entirely due to all of that.
Latest rumours suggest parent company Ford are considering pulling the plug on the team, but these have been hotly denied. Jaguar have entrusted Ford man Gunther Steiner to fix the car with the help of their new wind tunnel and to make more personnel changes, perhaps not just in the factory.
Do you think Eddie Irvine will be driving for you next year?
Let's sort out this year first and get the car going, which the car is our real issue to work on, and this is what we're concentrating on.
Is this the worst car you've ever driven?
That's a leading question. It's got to be up there. It's got to be up there, but you know, we'll figure a solution.
There's been talk of bringing back last year's car. Is that likely?
Again, it's something we're looking at. Really, all I want to do is get points. I don't care which car I drive. I don't care what number. It's a 2 or a 3 or a 10 or a 1. Whatever car gets me points, that's all I'm interested in. And if it's the R2 is the car that gets us points, then that's the car, you know, we'll probably run. But there is logistical problems about running the old car, which makes life difficult. So we weren't anticipating it, and obviously, you know, you can't just bring it back, dust it down and send it into the season. It's not, life's not that simple.
Presumably, I mean, ultimately what you want to do is make the R3 quick. How soon can that happen?
We don't know, because we don't know all the things that are wrong with it. You know, if we had a list of, right, this is wrong, that's wrong, we fix this, we know these are big issues, that's going to find us the time, fantastic, but it's, at the minute we're still evaluating the problems. We've got tests going on as we speak, probably, that are trying to help us understand what's the problem.
But are you worried about how it reflects on you as a driver?
For sure. I don't like driving around, I think it was 5 seconds off the pace. You know, in Australia, it's embarrassing. But, you know, we've made our mistakes. You pay the price. I'm part of that sort of process, so we got to just work through it logically, and if we do our homework correctly, we'll come out of it at the other end of the tunnel.
Eddie Irvine worried and embarrassed. What a contrast at Minardi, though. They arrive at their sponsor's home on the back of a magnificent Melbourne weekend, but a reality check for them at Sepang. Mark Webber spinning in the first practice session, and the Minardi Acertec engine fading away after that. Still, though, a warm glow at Minardi after their miracle in Australia.
It may only have been a 5th place, but for Mark Webber, Paul Stoddart and the Little Minardi team, the Australian race result was as good as a win, even if fate did play a part.
People will say we were lucky, and I'll just agree with them. But I think that's what makes Formula One so special, because really that's what it's all about. Anything can happen in Formula One, in the famous words of someone we both know, it usually does, and you know, we proved that.
For us to finish the race and to get 2 points, I mean, there's no question that we're very lucky, but still got to get to the finish, and it's not easy in Grand Prix racing these days, and we pulled it off, and it is a special moment for me, no question about that.
Melbourne was just a dream for me. Australia, Melbourne, Mark's Australian, first Grand Prix debut. If you wrote a fairy tale script, you wouldn't have added into it all of the things that happened to us, not just on the Saturday and Sunday, but indeed throughout the week, from our arrival the previous Sunday right up until we left on the Wednesday.
It's just such a great injection of energy in terms of, you know, result. That's what we all come here for, to try and get results like that. So it's great for the boys. I mean, they're here so fired up, and we'll run on that for the next few races. But we don't want to rest on our laurels. We want to try and finish some more races and do well, and we think we can.
A lot of Minardi's budget comes from Malaysian sponsors, and here in Kuala Lumpur the focus has inevitably shifted to local boy Alex Young.
Generally it's been quite good, you know. I mean, people have been coming up to me and saying congratulations and wishing me luck and stuff. So that's been really good. I suppose coming from the last race in Australia and seeing how much support Mark got, yeah, I feel the press could have been a bit more supportive. I think, you know, Formula One is still quite new here, and they have unrealistic expectations, say. I think that generally the press here think that because we finished 5th and 7th the last race, we'll be on the podium this race.
In reality, we need something to level the field. Now, I don't always want it to be an accident. I'd be more than happy to see the clouds open up like they did this time last year here, and it just throws that degree of unpredictability into the race. And when you are competing at the back of the grid, you need things like that to happen, because you do profit from the mistakes of others or from good luck. Maybe it won't be our turn. Maybe it'll be us that go out next time. But that's, as I said before, it's what makes it so exciting.
Dry in Malaysia at the moment. Webber and Alex Young 21st and 22nd in morning practice. But you mentioned Minardi and Australia, Tony, and everyone just smiles.
Well, we all love the underdog, and it was a fantastic fairy tale, as they said. But there's a couple of things there. Webber went through that race in a lot of pain in Australia. The seat wasn't fitting him in quite well. He's got a bit of back trouble here. Alex Young, obviously the hero in Malaysia, the very first time he's raced in Malaysia, the very first time for a Malaysian Grand Prix driver. 52,000 ticket sales so far, up on last year of 30,000, so let's hope they really get behind the young Malaysian driver.
Yeah, let's hope so in Malaysia. Michael Schumacher has always been on pole at Sepang. The heat and the humidity there, a real test of the driver's stamina and concentration. 56 times round, close to 3.5 miles a lap. Let's join Martin Brundle.
We're in the pit lane of this wonderful purpose-built Formula One facility. It's 35 degrees centigrade, 55% humidity and rising. You could fry an egg on the racetrack. There have been 3 great races here in Sepang. Michael Schumacher starting from pole each time and would have won all three, save giving one away to his teammate and World Championship contender Eddie Irvine in 1999. Why is Michael so good around here? Well, I believe it's because there are many fast corners that are not quite flat out, and Michael's confidence and acrobatic driving style allow him to take a little bit of extra speed through each of the mid corners. As ever, the start will be crucial, especially here, because the cars will get hotter than ever waiting for those famous red lights to go out. A year ago, Rubens Barrichello and Ralf Schumacher tripped over each other once again in the ever-eventful turns 1 and 2. It's a long run down to that first corner, over 180 miles an hour, cold front tyres, cold brakes, and often there is contact. When it happens, keep a calm head, steer around the trouble, because turn 2 is just a few metres away. Changing across the track, no time to look in the mirrors, and too many cars, not enough tarmac, and a lot of early tears. When the field spreads out a little bit, you can make it work. Here's Coulthard in the same corner, getting rude and a little bit aggressive with Schumacher, but he makes it stick. A driver's eye view of that turn 2 now, and immediately into 3, passing through 150 miles an hour already. A short squirt uphill towards turn 4, 180 miles an hour at the top. Come down 4 gears and take a calm turn in. The corner opens up nicely on the exit and smoothly on the power then in the Williams towards 5. 140 miles an hour, just tickling the throttle, blending down to 135, up to 150, now 160 before 7, which leads immediately into 8. Keep it calm, 85 miles an hour, 85 again, pinpoint accuracy, neat and tidy, looks good. Build up to 175 before the enormous stop into 9. Come down 5 gears, just 45 on the apex. Turn 10 is a sweeping accelerative right-hander, 135 miles an hour, and 11 already. Third gear, 80. It's a bit clumsy. Short straight towards 12. This is scary. Watch this. Super commitment, really wide on the exit. 13 leads automatically into 14. 70 miles an hour through the apex. Plenty of room on the exit to let the car have its head and down the straight, which in race conditions give you good opportunities for overtaking. Get in the slipstream, get a good tow, and then be last to the late breakers. Get the nose up the inside and begin to squeeze your competitor towards the outside. Back on board then, the same corner. It's the last one of the lap, turn 15, just 50 miles an hour. He's got the front end hooked up nicely. Now he's just got to drive for the line. It's been an aggressive but controlled and fast lap, and he knows it. A shake of the fist over the line. Good time. The team will be pleased with that too. It's a great track, but the drivers all grimace because they know they'll lose at least 3.5 kilos in fluid during the race. Ironically, water is another problem here in the form of sudden monsoon downpours. Even the champions can fumble at critical moments. Williams and McLaren have been saying that their lack of performance in Melbourne was all about track and weather conditions not suiting their tyres, and it's all going to be different here in steamy Sepang. Well, this afternoon's qualifying session will give them their chance to prove it.
Thank you, Martin. Jenson Button going pretty well in practice. 7th quickest. Here is Jenson with Louise.
That's right, Jim. Jenson, there appears to be a quiet confidence in the camp this weekend. As Jim's just pointed out, you were 7th this morning. What do you reckon for this afternoon?
Well, hopefully we can stay in the same position. I think that would be good for us. I think it'll be a little bit more difficult gaining any places above us with the Ferraris, McLarens, and Williams being so quick. But you know, there might be a chance.
The general consensus up and down the pit lane seems to be that it's going to be very close this afternoon. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't have a clue. I really haven't got a clue. I mean, so much can change from practice to qualifying, but I think the first 3 teams will be pretty close, and then we'll be a little bit behind, hopefully, with a gap behind us. But I'm pretty happy with where things are going, which is positive, and let's see what happens.
How easy is it to get a good lap at this circuit? Is traffic a problem?
Not really. I mean, every circuit's the same, really, when you get to the end of qualifying, but I think it's quite an easy circuit to get a good lap on. It's a nice circuit. I've always found it very difficult here, so it's nice to be in the top 10 at the moment.
Have a good one this afternoon.
Cheers, thank you.
You had a tough time in Australia, keen to put things right in Malaysia. Now, when you rejoin us, we're going to be talking to David Coulthard. See you shortly. And the countdown continues towards qualifying for the Malaysian Grand Prix. Be sure to join us tomorrow morning, 6:45 a.m. The race starts at 7, and after qualifying, a chance for you to win a Williams. OK, now let's have a word with David Coulthard. A few problems for him on Friday. His McLaren on fire. He was still second quickest. This is this morning's action. A 120-mile-an-hour spin for David at turn 12. He'll be looking for a decent performance in qualifying. Let's hear what he's got to say about his experience.
It's quite a spin, David. What happened?
But understeer wide onto the curb on the exit, which in itself shouldn't have been a problem. But then where the circuit sort of comes back to the left, it was obviously quite bumpy, and it launched the car, and then obviously it bottomed out.
What with everything else, you're down a bit on track time. How's that going to affect you for qualifying?
Yeah, obviously I lost a lot of time yesterday morning as well, so that's not ideal preparation. Don't really feel as if I've found a complete line as yet, but just need to try and do the best I can.
Do you think the speed's in the car ultimately?
I think we need to see where Ferrari are in qualifying. I think that it's obviously quite close between ourselves and Williams, but I've got a feeling that Michael might be able to pull something out in qualifying.
Well, he normally does pull something out in quali, doesn't he? Michael, always on pole over there in Sepang. How do you see the balance of power at the moment between McLaren and Ferrari?
It's quite delicate, Jim, because it's based on the tyres, and as Martin was talking about, the heat should suit the Michelin tyres much better, and David Coulthard and McLaren are on Michelins. But it's this poor start to the season so far for David, which is a big concern. He had the gearbox glitches in Australia, which kept throwing him off the track. He's had poor luck right from the start in Sepang on Friday when he had this fire. A whole coil broke down and overheated the engine. The exhaust got hot. Next thing, the bodywork was on fire. And Kimi Räikkönen has been ahead of him each time with no problems seemingly at the moment. That must be frustrating David immensely.
So then they are all set to go over in Sepang. A reminder, we'll be checking your emails and telling you about a great competition after the session. And when you rejoin us, we'll be talking to Martin Brundle and to our commentator, James Allen. It's the qualifying session for the Malaysian Grand Prix on ITV1 with Martin Brundle and James Allen.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning, everybody back in the UK. Well, the second qualifying session of the new Formula One season. And unlike the last one 2 weeks ago in Melbourne, it's not at all clear who the pace setter is going to be here this afternoon. It's very tight indeed. This morning it was Montoya from Räikkönen, Ralf Schumacher, Rubens Barrichello fourth, David Coulthard, who, as you've already heard, had a spin, he was fifth. Michael Schumacher down in sixth place. Now one of these six is sure to get the pole, but which one will it be? And were any of them sandbagging this morning is another question that's going round the paddock. Have we seen the sort of pace that they're capable of? No one yet has matched last year's pole time, and that's surprising given the developments in engine and tyre technology. Unlike Australia, neither tyre company seems to have any kind of distinct advantage here. Michelin took 1, 2, 3 this morning, but Ferrari on the Bridgestones were very quick yesterday, so really, Martin, nothing to choose between them, it seems.
Difficult to know, isn't it? Schumacher this morning just completing 10 laps, seemed to be quite comfortable, no apparent car problem, but that's remarkably short even for him. But we are expecting some banzais, and I think David Coulthard alluded to it. You know, we don't really know where Michael's at. Of course, the green light is on. We are 30 seconds into this session. And on the track we have Alex Young. He's had a fairly torrid weekend. He's been off the road quite a lot, but then so have the megastars, haven't they? We've seen Montoya, both Schumachers, Coulthard, Räikkönen. They've all had at least 3 spins apiece, and Michael Schumacher especially, actually. So they're absolutely on the limit, and I'm led to believe that the way the track is this weekend, on the line has a little, decent grip. Any slight deviation from the racing line, and it's very, very slippery indeed. And there's this theory that obviously it's a relatively new track here, 99 it was finished, but each year passes and it's baked in the sun, and I think we're losing a bit of grip here. Last year's pole, a 135.2, and you have to wonder whether we're going to beat that. And of course this last few years we've seen lap times just decreasing in big chunks, haven't we? But it seems to have stabilised in that respect, James.
It's like threading a needle through the eye of a needle, indeed, this circuit. Alex Young on board though. Certainly been put in the shadows by his teammate Mark Webber, who got 5th place in Australia. Tremendous adulation over there for him. He's the local hero though here. Alex Young not had quite the same support as Webber had in Australia, but off the back of his 7th place, let's not forget, in that opening Grand Prix of the season, coming here. Still looks a little bit awkward in the car, I think.
I think he's struggling to get fully up to speed with the Formula One car. That KL, of course, is very appropriate that he's the first man around here this afternoon. Kuala Lumpur it stands for. They are sponsored by the city, and of course he is Malaysian. So as you say though, James, not exactly a rapturous response as he comes past the start-finish line. In fact, now a few people up on their feet in the grandstand in front of us and clapping and cheering. So they save a bit more of that for Ferrari. Down into turn 1, braking about 60 metres before the corner. In fact, he's got a good line through there. If you can hook up with that white line on the inside of 1, and there's a bollard on 2, so you can't cut it too much. And you don't hear so much traction control working on this car. I think it's a system that's not working as well as on a Williams or a McLaren, for example. 175 up into turn 4. Another bollard on the corner to stop them cutting. And it seems calm, although not total commitment, I would say, there from Alex Young. He probably just wants to get a sensible lap in the bag. And this is the nature of this circuit. One corner very much leading directly into another. So if you get the exit wrong of the first part, you're wrong for the entry of the next. Oh, and a bit of nasty oversteer through turn 8, up to about 170, and hard on the anchors. You must get it inside, keep it inside. That was okay, but he had to hesitate, didn't he, on the throttle, lost time on the way out, and that is where those tenths and ultimately seconds start ebbing away. Now this, I think, is the most committed corner on the racetrack. Quite a lot out of the throttle, but I think the big boys are flat out through there. It's where Coulthard went off this morning, and this is too calm. He's really not attacking it on the way in. Therefore, he has to get hard on the throttle on the way out, and that's giving him an oversteer. He needs to carry more speed through, so he has less deceleration and less need to jump on the throttle pedal. Turn 15, and once again, almost coasting in. This morning's times are in the 1 minute 36s. This then is a 1:40.6. And how does that compare with his time this morning, James?
It's exactly the same as what he set this morning. Slightly faster, Alex Young, around about 4 seconds off the pace of what we expect the pole to be. We're looking for something in the high 1 minute 35 range this afternoon from either Mr. Montoya, one of the Mr. Schumachers, possibly even David Coulthard as well. Could get himself up there, although you have to say, Martin, that Coulthard has looked not terribly comfortable here this weekend. Several spins and a slight edginess, I would say, in the way he's been driving. Is it this problem of the single line around the track? He's just finding it hard to put the car on it.
I think because he lost the hours running yesterday, he's playing catch-up for the rest of the weekend. And you know, this is a circuit, of course, where the teams don't test. It's not a facility where you're allowed to test, and the cost would be prohibitive anyway to bring a test team all the way over here. So, you know, those laps are crucial laps. It's not like when they go to Silverstone or Manicourt or Monza, where they do lap after lap in the winter and through test sessions. And it makes a big difference when you come to a circuit such as this.
Toyota managed to squeeze a test in towards the end of last season on their world tour of testing. They took in all the circuits like Interlagos, which the teams don't visit except once a year for the Grand Prix. And there's Gustav Brunner, the designer, who left the Minardi team last season rather acrimoniously and went over to Toyota. And he's doing splendid work. Mika Salo this morning, 11th fastest, which is pretty good effort for a brand new team. They got the point for 6th place in Australia. Terrific start to their campaign. Is Young going for another lap?
Yes, he is indeed. And yes, Toyota are allowed to test here. Now he's shooting in the pit lane. It's always a strange line they have to take in that last corner, and they suddenly bolt down the pit lane. But Toyota weren't competitors in the Formula One Championship last year, therefore they were allowed to test where they wanted to. But there are nominated test circuits in Europe, and they're the only 4 that are going to hold a Grand Prix later in the year that the teams are allowed to test at. Any other circuit they go to, has to be inside Europe and has to be Formula One approved.
Mark Webber on track then, the hero of Melbourne, the local boy from Queensland, who got the whole of Australia on his feet. He's now back down to earth here in Malaysia. 21st fastest this morning, and both the Minardis really struggling for power around this circuit. The Asiatech engine regarded as being possibly the weakest on the grid at the moment. It's a big improvement on the customer Ford Cosworth they had last year, but it's still well done on power compared to the big boys from BMW, Mercedes-Benz and Ferrari.
It didn't look too shabby though in the race in Melbourne, didn't it, when they were trying to pass him down the straight and couldn't get past Webber. So I don't think it's too far off the pace. I think it's generally accepted in the paddock that the BMW is the strongest, around 850 horsepower, probably 825 for the Ferrari and 800 for the Mercedes and the rest of them. But 50 horsepower around this type of length of circuit, best part of a second a lap. I would imagine this guy is another 50 horsepower behind Ferrari and McLaren, for example. So he's pushing it uphill, isn't he?
It's a lot to give away. It's certainly a lot to give away. Webber on track then. Hasn't done very many laps so far this weekend. He only did 6 in total on Friday, while most other people did around 40. Lost a lot of time, had a spin in the morning, and then a big engine problem in the afternoon. So he's been playing catch-up big time this weekend.
There's a secondary significance to the Minardis going out one at a time. A lot of TV exposure. When the sponsors calculate at the end of the number of seconds that they've had of exposure, moments like this, you know, there's a reason why these two cars are out there, and I'm serious about that. It's calculated the value of the exposure that was received compared to the money that was put in by a lot of the sponsors, and moments like this are key for these smaller teams, because the big boys, they're always leading the race and they get about 90% of the TV coverage. So that's why it's important for these tail enders, as it were, horrible word to use, but it's a fact of life, why they need to get out there and get some TV exposure.
It's all part of the money go round, which is Formula One. A lot of talk about money at the moment in Formula One, cost cutting. Teams such as Minardi and Jordan really leading the way, hoping to cut costs in Formula One. We'll talk about that no doubt a little bit later on. Meanwhile, Mark Webber finishing his flying lap, and 0.6 of a second faster than his teammate Alex Young. 1:39.9 for Webber, and that's a little bit faster than he managed this morning. So the track appears to be faster than it was in the morning practice sessions. That could mean that the front runners, and that's certainly one of them, will be pushing down into the 1:35. It's going to be a very, very close contest. It could just come down to having the right lap at the right moment, or perhaps one of your main opponents getting a little bit caught up with traffic.
Absolutely. We saw a shot of Michael Schumacher. He's earning about $1 million a weekend. He's not put in too much hard work today, has he? Just 10 laps, but it's all about quality and not quantity. There's the Sauber team. We're expecting them anytime that Williams and McLaren or Michelin are having an off weekend, Sauber should be there ready to punish them, but we haven't quite seen that pace from them that we were expecting. In fact, best of the rest so far in Malaysia appears to be the Renault team.
Indeed, and one team that's really struggling at the moment, two teams that are really struggling, are Jaguar and BAR. BAR this morning were down in 19th and 20th places, and Jaguar, well, they were 14th and 17th. So a lot of long faces in both of those garages. A lot of the mechanics getting a little bit disgruntled now. A lot of rumours that David Richards, the new boss of BAR, is going to start getting his axe out soon and cutting a few people from the technical department there. And Jaguar, well, as you've already heard, they're considering running a hybrid version of last year's car. It's not quite as dramatic as it sounds. That hybrid is about 1.5 seconds faster than the R2 Jaguar, which started the season, but still it's a step backwards, there's no doubt about it. Well, he's sitting in last year's car as well. Again, a hybrid version of a car which has already now won 10 Grand Prix. One of the most successful Grand Prix cars of modern times, this F2001 Ferrari, let's not forget. And a car which seemingly, Martin, you can just tune it right into the circuit very, very quickly.
It's just got tremendous rear grip. You can see the drivers able to commit to a corner, not have to make a secondary movement of the steering wheel on the exit. They're always hard on the throttle with total confidence. But they have not got the advantage they had 2 weeks ago in Melbourne, no doubt about it. It's going to be much closer at the sharp end of the grid this afternoon. We think Ferrari have something in their pocket, and we're watching Sato, of course, in the Jordan. He's not really featured much this weekend, has he? Had a few dramas, technical dramas, and went off the road, but generally Sato's been a little bit quiet.
Well, he'll just be glad to get some laps in the bag. If you remember, in Australia in qualifying, he had a total nightmare. He'd had an accident on the Saturday morning, and then his car broke down in the beginning of qualifying, and when he eventually did get out, it was raining, so he started from the back of the grid under a steward's waiver. This year he's hoping to get a dry lap in. Takuma Sato, he's managed 75 laps so far this weekend, so anybody looking at this and thinking, well, give the guy a break, he doesn't really know the circuit. 75 laps is plenty of time to get to know the track, plenty of running.
Yes, at this level, 10 laps should be enough to understand the track. You've got data available to you before you ever arrive there. Some teams have simulators. Their drivers can go and drive the circuit at the factory. Then you walk around it, go around on a scooter or a push bike as well if you want, and it shouldn't really take you long at all to dial into a racetrack, even one as complex as this. Sato did a 1:39.1 this morning. We're expecting him clearly to be faster than the European Minardis, and he should comfortably go top. He was only 2/10 up in sector 1, so it wasn't a stunning first part of this lap, but now look, he's 1.5 seconds ahead. Michael Schumacher out of the car. I think Schumacher was just checking some pedals out. He never gets in the car normally without his crash helmet on if he's going to go out onto the racetrack. So that shot we saw of Michael was just checking probably an alignment of a brake pedal or throttle pedal. There's infinite adjustment down there for the driver. So Sato then homing in on the back straight towards turn 15. You diagonal it to be the shortest route, to be on the opposite side of the racetrack at the end. It's a left-hander, as you can see, and hacksawing away at the steering wheel, trying to get the nose in on the exit of the corner. Over the line he goes with a 1:38.1. That's a full second faster than this morning, but that would have put him 8th actually. So that's a good run in this morning's times. I agree with you. I think now we're seeing brand new tyres and absolutely the minimum amount of fuel. The fuel is weighed. They'll be coming in the pits with little more than fumes. That's how they calculate this. So new tyres, absolute minimum weight, total commitment, and Sato then with easily his best time of the weekend.
Yeah, good performance from Takuma Sato. Totally dominated the British Formula 3 Championship last year. Totally dominated the Macau Grand Prix, which is the blue ribbon event for young up-and-coming drivers. Certainly one of the quickest drivers to have come out of Formula 3 in recent years, and beginning now to find his feet in Formula 1. It's not easy for him. He's got Giancarlo Fisichella as his teammate, who many people consider the third best driver in Formula 1 after Schumacher and Montoya. But here's Jarno Trulli. He certainly considers himself to be amongst the best. Not had a great weekend so far, Trulli. A lot of technical problems, an engine failure yesterday. Not got an awful lot of laps in, and more importantly, when he has got laps in, he's been put in the shade by his teammate Jenson Button for the first time really so far.
Yeah, Jenson's really appeared to have had the edge on Trulli. You're right, he's had a troubled weekend, but we're really, Benetton I think are leading the first division here with the Premier Leaguers. Obviously Ferrari, Williams and McLaren seem to have a clear 1 second advantage, but so this I think is going to set the scene for the best of the rest this afternoon, and it's going to be interesting to just see what Trulli can pull out of the bag. He can be very, very fast in qualifying, so often in the Jordan, but in a sensational time deep into the top 10 and then didn't back it up in the race. So we know he can turn a hot lap.
I remember Monaco a couple of years ago, got on the front row of the grid in the Jordan, so he certainly can do it. Very much one of the fast drivers. The swap took place last season between him and Fisichella. Many people couldn't quite see the point of it. They thought they were more or less interchangeable in terms of their ability and their image and their speed. Well, we might find out this season whether Trulli can do more with the Renault than Fisichella would have done.
I guess it's like being in a disco. You're probably always convinced that somebody else's girlfriend's prettier than yours or something. But
no.
Aren't you surprised that this car doesn't look more like the old Renault colours, the white and yellow? It still looks like it's a Benetton, and there's so little Renault notification on that car, advertising on that car, that it's not what I expected, is it you? I thought they were going to go, when Renault took it over, I thought they were going to return to the glory days when they had white and yellow cars.
Well, yellow and grey is their sort of corporate colours, isn't it? And I thought the car would be predominantly yellow, but I think it's an indication of how much money you need in Formula 1 these days. They still need the tobacco money, they still need every sponsor they can get to get this thing working. 0.3 of a second then, Trulli faster than Sato. this, as Martin said, the battle, the middle race really. You've got the front race with Ferrari, McLaren and Williams. You've got a middle race going on with these guys, Sauber. Jordan would like to think they're part of it, but at the moment they seem to be struggling a little bit. The Honda engine not giving them what they want. And Trulli in Sector 2, looking for something around about the 57 mark. Not a particularly good middle sector for Jarno Trulli.
And I tell you why, he had to downshift in the middle of 7 and 8. That should be balanced throttle and accelerating. I think he ran wide and had to come down an extra gear. He needs to bury this well into the 1:37s if he's going to post a representative lap time for that car. And as you said, it's not looking good. He lost a half a second to Sato, the current pole sitter, in the mid-sector with that problem in turns 7 and 8. He should pull some of that back in the last part, which is over 40 seconds, just the final third sector of this lap. Over the line he goes. He does go fastest, but it's a late 1:37. Should have been an early 1:37. But truly then sets a new mark for the afternoon. Remember though, last year's pole, 1:35.2.
Looking at the arrows on track as Trulli winds down. Jenson Button, his teammate, still waiting for him to go out on track. There's Jacques Villeneuve, who had a bit of a drama just before the start of the session. It seemed he was going to have to use the spare car. Jumped into that, then jumped back into his race car again. And a really troubled weekend for the British American racing team.
Yeah, we hear from the F1 ITV pit crew that Michael was sitting in the spare car when we saw him and actually just checking the mirrors and pedals. Of course, this is the first point in the weekend they can use the spare car. If they break down at any other point, they're just standing and they become spectators. Again, to save cost, although that one's always confused me because there is a special team here that run only that car. You can't have it just parked up with a dust cover on it. So it is operated as if it's going to go out in the qualifying and go out in the warm-up and the race with a whole support crew, but they can't use it until Saturday lunchtime.
One of the proposals, interestingly, I've heard has been discussed for next season amongst all these cost-saving measures and new rules in Formula 1 is that, in fact, they would run the third car with perhaps the reserve driver in it. So Renault would put Fernando Alonso in the third car, give the spectators some more cars to look at. Who knows? It's an interesting idea.
It would make a lot of sense because until they nominate which car they're going to use on a Friday morning, the T car has to be prepared and ready. And the moment the practice session starts, you see the mechanics pulling the T car apart. You know, you're 1 minute into the first practice session of the weekend, and the engine's coming out of the T car. That's not going to be used until Saturday.
It's a bit of a pointless exercise. So on track at the moment, Alan McNish in the Toyota. Pedro de la Rosa you're looking at now, just coming down the straightaway. It's very distinctive grandstand here at Sepang. Wonderful pagoda-like structure. And what can he do with this rather recalcitrant Jaguar? Third fastest at the moment in a 38.398, which is a reasonable time. He's had the upper hand over his teammate Eddie Irvine so far this weekend, no doubt about that, as we ride on board with the Sauber.
So Coulthard and Montoya then, two men we're expecting to be in the top 6, are on the racetrack. Now we're going to see what the pace is this afternoon. You're on board with the Sauber. Now you're watching Kimi Räikkönen, who is also on track, coming around. Räikkönen has yet to start his flying lap. That's, in fact, it is. He's just into the first 2 corners of the flying lap. We'll get his first sector time as he heads up into turn 4. So Räikkönen, he should easily turn the screens red here with a fastest first sector, and it's not, amazingly, it's not a good run up to turn 4. But the time really is made in this middle part and a couple of big commitments near the end of the lap, and traffic as well for Kimi Räikkönen in the form of the arrows. Didn't appear to have cost him too much time, but he would have been unsure. He would have had to hesitate in the middle of 7 and 8, a key little sector. So Räikkönen then should also be tipping the beam anytime soon for sector 2. And again, it's not the fastest one of the afternoon.
But overall, he is faster. He's made up ground on Jarno Trulli. So going into the final sector, Räikkönen looking as though he probably will pop to the top of the timesheets. But this is a lap he will probably want to forget, because his main rivals will be going considerably faster than this in the near future. Montoya out on track, the fastest man this morning, a lot expected of him. As Räikkönen comes down the back straight into the final corner. You can see there the straight line speeds in comparison to his teammate. I'll tell you that the Williamses are doing about 305 kilometres an hour. That's 6 more than these McLarens in a straight line. Raikkonen then a 1:37.175, and that's a very good final sector for him. A full 0.7 of a second then faster than Jarno Trulli. Raikkonen fastest, Trulli second, Sato third. As we look at Felipe Massa, that's really bad news for him because he's been ahead of his teammate all weekend in the Sauber. He's got a long run back to the pits.
And it's very bad news for Coulthard and Montoya, both on very quick laps at this time. Coulthard easily faster. Did he get through there before the yellow flags? I think Montoya is going to see yellow flags waving where Felipe Massa has gone off the circuit. He's got a right front puncture, look. That's what his problem is. So lost air pressure, and this is Coulthard then down the back straight towards the final turn. This is going to take provisional pole, but behind him Montoya is still on a hot lap, did not get held up by waved yellow flags. So Coulthard will take provisional pole away from teammate Raikkonen with a 36.7. Still expected both McLarens to be in the low 136s, and Montoya in the next 20 seconds or so is going to blow that away with a very, very good lap. Here he comes now. No problems on the way in. Can he keep the nose tight? Yes, he can. Listen to the traction control working overtime to give it optimum drive out of that final corner, and a 36.6 effectively. Montoya sneaks in. Not a great final sector for him. He was heading for a faster time than that.
But I just wondered that where Massa's incident was towards the end of sector 2, and up to that point Montoya was the fastest man on the track. He's obviously had a bit of a lift or something in the final sector. Maybe that's his little concession towards the yellow flags.
Ralf Schumacher's on a similar lap time, so we're watching Montoya, who I assume will now be on an in-lap. We need to be looking at the other Williams, please, because he's the man on the move. We're still watching Montoya, and Ralf Schumacher is out there trying to finish a very, very good lap. Definitely cruising then, Montoya, provisional pole sitter. And where is Ralf Schumacher? Let's hope they pick him up before the end of the lap, because Ralf does indeed go fastest by half a second. Unseen, unfortunately, by the TV camera. Ralf Schumacher on pole with a 1:36.086. Easily the fastest lap of the weekend.
Yes, the fastest lap we've seen so far. Still 0.4 of a second slower, though, than last year's pole position. And with 36 minutes of this session still to go, we have Ralf Schumacher fastest from his teammate Juan Montoya in second. Coulthard is in third. Raikkonen is fourth. Heidfeld in the Sauber is fifth. Jarno Trulli still sixth in the Renault. Seventh, Giancarlo Fisichella in the Jordan. What a terrifically reliable customer he is. He's been in the top 7 all weekend, and it's amazing how he just pops these laps in. Mika Salo up to 8th in the Toyota. That's a terrific effort from him, and he was saying yesterday in his press briefing that he believed this Toyota was capable of a top 10 grid slot here this weekend. Amazing for a team in only its second Grand Prix. Sato is 9th, and Della Rosa is in 10th place.
Well, this is your pole sitter, but he's cruising. He's coming in the pits this time around. He'll run out of fuel if he doesn't. That's why he's 7 seconds slower than his own current pole position. Michael Schumacher then we saw taking to the track. McNish, you're looking at now, unfortunately on his first lap out of the pits, he had to go back in straight away, repitted straight away, so he lost laps that way. But McNish now out for hopefully a run at a flying lap.
So, as you say, Martin, Michael Schumacher out on track. 3 cars we haven't seen yet. Rubens Barrichello, Jenson Button and Olivier Panis, and those have also just taken to the track. So with little over half an hour still to go, if they're going to get their 4 runs in, they're going to have to get busy. It's going to be a very fraught final half an hour of this qualifying session, because most people still got most of their work to do.
Yes, so we have on the racetrack 6 cars then. Barrichello hasn't left the pit garage yet, James. Looks like he's getting ready to. But 6 cars out on the racetrack. This is Alan McNish in the Toyota, and he's yet to start that flying lap, or where is he? There's no time up on the screen for the first sector for some reason. So McNish really not having a good afternoon so far.
Give us your read on McNish then. 32 years old, former teammate of yours in the Toyota sports car team. Got his break finally into Formula 1. A lot of people saying he won't be in there for long. As soon as they get up to speed, they'll have him out and put someone else in the car. Well, how do you think he's doing, and how do you think he'll fare?
I think he's doing just fine. He's keeping Salo well within his sights, and he is now starting that flying lap. He's a quality driver, Alan. I don't think he's out of his depth at all. I think he's quite capable of handling a Formula 1 car. Deserved to have a Formula 1 opportunity before now. Did a lot of testing for McLaren and others, and I always thought before the days of power steering, when I watched him testing somewhere like Estoril, the car always seemed to be slightly on top of him. He didn't seem to, he's a very little fella, and he didn't seem to have command of a Formula 1 car in the very high-speed corners. I think now with power steering, and maybe he's worked a lot on his upper body strength, I think he is in charge of that car and keeping, as I say, teammate and much more experienced driver, Salo, well within his sights.
Well, he's 0.2 of a second slower in the first sector than his teammate Salo, and just about half a second slower than the pole sitter. Looking for something within 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds of pole would be a good effort. A lot of jumping around there on the steering wheel for Alan McNish as he goes through sector 2 and into sector 3. 2 seconds off the pace at the moment.
Yes, he is. I mean, they were up to 5 seconds away this morning, but the car seems to respond well to new tyres. Bouncing around at the back end, that is terrifying at 120, 130 miles an hour when the back end skips out on you. But it seems to be a bit of a nightmare when the tyres are old. Watching this car through the weekend, they don't have a good setup, and they need the extra grip of the fresh tyre to overcome a lot of those problems. You're seeing him there, the back end, he's working the steering wheel just to keep the car on line into the corner, let alone taking the corner itself.
Look at his straight line speeds as McNish goes 14th. You can see he's not slow in a straight line, over 300 kilometres an hour, which probably suggests that he's taken some wing off the car, which is one of the reasons he might be struggling a bit.
Michael Schumacher on. We're looking at the wrong Ferrari, gentlemen. We need to be looking at Michael Schumacher. He's in the final sector of a lap that's going to be there we go, very, very close to Ralf Schumacher's 1:36.0. I think this is confirmation we're in for a close afternoon of qualifying. Remember, the two brothers were just shooting it out last year. Michael working quite hard on the way in, lost the apex, didn't really have the right line through turn 15. Is that going to cost him for provisional pole at the moment? Just makes it look, just by 1/10 of a second, got away with it, but he's got a little bit more time left.
The first man then to get under 1:36, Michael Schumacher at the front, where many expected to see him, but by nothing like the margins we've seen so far this season, particularly in Australia. Schumacher leading then with just over half an hour to go. Ralf Schumacher second, Montoya is third, Coulthard fourth, Raikkonen fifth, Button is sixth, Heidfeld seventh, Jarno Trulli eighth, ninth is Fisichella, 10th is Salo. Spare a thought for Eddie Irvine down in 17th place and just 0.2 of a second ahead of the Minardis. It's not been a good afternoon so far for Jaguar.
Yes, true to form so far. Jenson Button does appear to be best of the rest. He's sixth at the moment. Barrichello has just taken to the track in the second Ferrari, and how hard must that be for a driver? You're used to winning, and Jenson told us in his interview, you know, yeah, I'm looking, you know, 7th would be a good result today, but that's the mindset you have to have in Formula 1, I'm afraid. You can't delude yourself that you're going to be on pole with a car that's not capable of doing it.
Takuma Sato was saying a couple of days ago in his press briefing that he's got used to seeing P1 on his pit boards throughout his Formula 3 year. And in Australia it was extremely hard to take to see a double figure number being shown to him every time he went through. It must just chip away at you.
You see a lot of drivers who win in the junior Formula and get into Formula 1, and they never win a race again because, you know, it didn't work out for them in Formula 1 or whatever. They never see the checkered flag or the top step of the podium again.
We're looking at Michael Schumacher. Rubens Barrichello, though, is on track at the moment and winding up to a lap from the looks of things. As we look at David Coulthard, very distinctive eyes, green-grey eyes that David has. There's an advert featuring him on the back of a lot of magazines at the moment. It looks like he's had a fair bit of eyeliner put on him. I don't know if he was a new romantic in his teenage years, but he's got a lot of eyeliner in this advert that I've seen anyway. We'll discuss that with him later. Barrichello, though, 1/10 of a second slower than his teammate in Sector 1. A comparable sort of time to Ralf Schumacher, though, so this is to try and get himself up onto the front row of the grid. Statistically, the winner of this race has always come from the front of the grid, so that's where you really need to be at Sepang. And Rubens Barrichello riding a little bit on a crest of a wave, you have to say, after his pole position in Melbourne 2 weeks ago. Said on Thursday that he's feeling the best he's ever felt as a racing driver. Fatherhood has been good to him. It's made him feel more relaxed. He's got more balanced perspective on life, and he's now just driving for himself to do the best he possibly can. Forget what Michael Schumacher or anybody else is up to, but looked like he ran a bit wide there, Martin.
I think he did. I think he was slightly wrong-footed by the Jaguar that was parking itself on the apex, trying to get out of his way. That was Della Rosa. So I don't know how much that's affected Rubens. I have to say, the more stills photos I've seen and different camera angles since the Australian Grand Prix, Rubens had a little bit more to do with that first corner shunt than certainly I first thought. And over the line he goes in third. He was still the fastest man, actually, in the last sector of anybody so far this afternoon. So didn't hurt Barrichello too much at all. Ted is in the pits.
Martin, just to update you quickly on what the different teams are doing tyre-wise. Now, it's very interesting here, as you know, Martin, and you, of course, James, that everyone does a little bit of different things in this very, very abrasive surface. Of the Bridgestone runners, I can tell you Ferrari and BAR are on the harder compound, while the rest are on the softs. Now, the Michelins, they're all on the softer tyre, but what is interesting about this, Martin, and I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about this, is that it's the optional tyre. Michelin actually expected them all to run with the other tyre, and they're not.
That's a fact. They call them the prime and the option. The prime's the tyre they expect to run on. The option is sort of the backup, if you like. And they found that the option is faster by nearly half a second in the Michelin camps, and seems to hang on just as well. Maybe because we're seeing less track temperature here than we have in previous years. And often it can be well up into the 45, 47 degrees centigrade. Today, it's up there 35, 36. There's been a lot of peat fires around here, and you may wonder what on earth I'm talking about, but there's a lot of smoke in the sky, and I think it's quite smoggy here, and I think it's suppressing the temperature we would normally see.
It's quite dramatic, actually, driving in from the airport on Wednesday. It was a bit like the scenes we saw in Sydney around Christmas time with the bushfires, the dramatic bushfires. Obviously nothing like on that scale, but a tremendous amount of smoke over all the motorways. I thought there'd been a terrible accident, but it's been there every day, and it's been encroaching further and further towards this racetrack. You can just see it on the hills over yonder, but at the moment it's not affecting the track itself. Montoya, though, is on the move. First sector has been reasonable. His middle sector, though, is very fast indeed, and he's looking to get a lap in the 1:35s. We haven't picked him up yet because we're looking at Massa. We're looking at David Coulthard now, though, on board with him. What's he up to?
What he's up to is bringing the car to the left-hand side. There's slower traffic ahead already, but ignore that and get the nose in, David, and keep it in. And then you've got to be calm into turn 2, he tells me, and just not try to chase it. This then will be Montoya coming over the line. What does he do? He's fourth at the moment. He goes first, a 35.692. He's on provisional pole by over quarter of a second. So that's laid down the challenge to Michael Schumacher. Ralf Schumacher remains third. David Coulthard on track. And he's not had a good first sector, has Coulthard. So at the moment, it seems to me the McLarens are buried down there in 5th and 6th places, unless they can pull something else out of the bag.
And you can see for yourself on the monitor, you could a second ago, a second is the gap between the McLarens and the Williamses. Both teams running on the same Michelin tyres, remember. Ferrari are the odd ones out there on the Bridgestone, and that's probably proof also, Martin, that time of Montoya's, that he did lift for the Massa incident on his first flying lap, because that's clearly what that car and what that driver is capable of.
I think it's also proof. Remember what I said at the beginning of the qualifying, that we think this car has 50 horsepower more than the McLaren, and that is a second a lap, no doubt about it. And the two Williams have been 4 to 5 kilometres an hour faster through the 3 key speed traps than anybody else. It's been consistent. Schumacher, Montoya, Ralf Schumacher, Montoya have dominated the speed traps around here.
So with 24 minutes still to go, and most drivers still having 2 runs to come, Montoya fastest for Michael Schumacher, then it's Ralf Schumacher third, Barrichello fourth, Coulthard fifth, Raikkonen sixth, Heidfeld seventh for Sauber, eighth still hanging on there, Jenson Button, ninth is Fisichella, and Jarno Trulli rounds out the top 10. 22 minutes of this qualifying session for tomorrow's Malaysian Grand Prix still to go, and it is very, very tight. It's like Martin's trousers, in fact. Montoya fastest 1:35.692, but ahead of Michael Schumacher by just 2.5 tenths of a second, and another tenth and a bit to Ralf Schumacher. Rubens Barrichello fourth, Raikkonen fifth, and it's very, very close indeed at the front. You're looking at Ralf Schumacher, who failed to improve on his third fastest time. He was 2.5 tenths slower than he had been on his first run, so they're all, Martin, looking for nickels and dimes here, aren't they, at the moment?
Yes, they are. It's as close as we thought. Raikkonen has popped up into 5th place ahead of Coulthard, but the two McLarens remaining 5th and 6th. And the only other significant thing is this man, Ralf Schumacher, failing to improve. In fact, 3 tenths slower on his second attempt. So has he peaked? We've got Montoya on pole on the 1:35.6 with over a quarter of a second advantage on Michael Schumacher. And Ralf Schumacher not finding some extra speed. Seems to me as if it's going to be between Williams and Ferrari for the first 4 slots this afternoon.
Indeed it is. 4 cars on track at the moment. We've got Jenson Button looking to improve on his 8th place. We've got Pedro de la Rosa looking to improve on his 13th place. And we've got Alex Young looking to improve on his 21st. But more significantly, we've got Michael Schumacher looking to improve on his 2nd place. And we'll surely pick him up shortly.
Panis in the BAR has been out once but has not posted a time. Olivier Panis in the BAR, not yet in the motor race.
Yes, I'm sure our F1 ITV pit crew will be able to give us a reason for that. 20 minutes to go, and Panis has only done 1 slow lap. As we look at Felipe Massa coming down the pit lane, there is Michael Schumacher, just winding himself up to start a flying lap. In fact, he has started the flying lap, so we'll get a sector time for him very shortly indeed. This is his 2nd run of the afternoon in the Ferrari. The man who started on pole position for every one of the Malaysian Grand Prix. What an extraordinary thing to be able to say. We've had 3 races here, and he's been on pole for all 3 of them.
He's got his work cut out this afternoon, although he's been fastest in Sector 1 by 0.02 of a second over pole sitter Montoya. But really, Sector 1 is all about 2 Mickey Mouse corners and a straight. This is the crucial part in the middle, and if your car's working through the corners, it's going to show up here. Good tidy line there, good drive out of the corner for Michael. That looked good, and you can see the result. He's now best part of a 1/10 of a second up, but we know how fast those Williams are in a straight line. And the final part of the lap is 2 straight lines. Oh, tremendous commitment there for Michael Schumacher, hanging on to the back of it. More oversteer in turn 14, and actually a little bit scrappy. You wonder if he really was pushing a little bit too hard there, but now he's got to go down 2 straights and 1 hairpin at the end of it, and still look, having to really work. Remember, he missed that apex on his fastest lap. It was a little bit tidier, but still a touch scrappy on the way in. Is it good enough? Yes, it is. Look at that. That matches just about last year's pole position, and Montoya says, start the engine, boys.
He's back on track. Michael Schumacher takes back provisional pole position with 18 minutes of this session still remaining. What about Ralf Schumacher, though? Can he stake a claim? What about the 2nd Ferrari of Rubens Barrichello? Out on track at the moment, Rubens Barrichello, but his first sector has been disappointing. It's 0.3 of a second slower than his teammate so far. He's got a lot of work to do if he's going to get on terms, and look at that. Now he's 7/10 down after 2 sectors.
Yeah, that lap was breathtaking from Schumacher. I mean, he was on the ragged edge. Even though he was having to counter-steer the oversteer, he still kept it moving forward, which is what Michael's such a specialist at. And it looked, didn't it? It looked almost over the top, but somehow or other he kept the chassis moving forwards, and, well, they'll take some beating. 1:35.266, and Barrichello now 9/10 behind teammate Michael Schumacher. He will want to get buried also into the 1:35. It's not there yet. Is this a better lap? No, it's not. It's a slower lap. So Rubens will have to be getting the computer printouts out in the garage and seeing where Michael, we've seen it, we know where he was fast. Now Rubens is going to see it graphically with a little line showing the speed difference.
Seeing it is one thing though, actually achieving it, that's quite another matter. Louise, what can you tell us?
That pole lap of Michael's brought a smile to the faces of the Ferrari mechanics, as you can imagine. I think they were aware of the fact that pole was by no means a foregone conclusion here, and as it's been shown by the fact that there's been an enormous amount of work going on in the pit lane. This is not one of those sessions when the mechanics put a fresh set of tyres on, polish the car and send it out again. They have been fine-tuning it, feathering little bits here and there throughout the session. Michael made some changes to his rear and front wing before going out and setting that pole time. Busiest garage at the moment though is McLaren. They've had all sorts of things going on there. Rear suspension changes for Coulthard, brand new rear wing going on Raikkonen's car, but they've obviously still got a bit to find.
Raikkonen on track then for his third attempt of the afternoon, and his second and third are very close. He's decided he just wants to keep the momentum going. 16 minutes and 15 seconds remaining, so both McLarens then will be out. Raikkonen into his hot lap, Coulthard obviously just coasting out of the pits, remembering the pit speed limits. We've seen them all find already this year, or majority of the drivers have tripped over these speed limit fines, but Raikkonen a half a second down, but that still represents his best run to turn 4, and that tells you something, doesn't it? Half a second down within 25 seconds of the lap.
It's a big chunk of time for Kimi Raikkonen to find the young 22-year-old Finnish driver. What are the margins we're talking about here? Well, Michael Schumacher on pole by 0.4 of a second over Juan Montoya. That's a lot for Montoya to find, but he's on track at the moment looking for it, and he's not finding it. His first sector one has been 25.052, which is a good, well, it's not much, it's 300ths slower than Michael Schumacher's first sector.
And while we were watching the Ferrari in the pits being manoeuvred, unfortunately I think Raikkonen's made a mistake somewhere. He's well off the pace, now he's coasting, look, and so I think Raikkonen made a mistake somewhere in the middle sector while we just briefly cut away to Barrichello being pushed back in the garage. And third attempt of the afternoon not working then. I'm expecting him to just bolt in the pit lane now and not take to another lap. Indeed he does. So Raikkonen then with one chance left.
Interestingly, Martin, looking at the times here, it seems to be a battle between Michael Schumacher and Juan Montoya, because Ralf Schumacher in the second of the Williamses is a further 0.4 of a second slower than his teammate, and Rubens Barrichello is almost a second slower than his teammate. So it's a bit like the old Hakkinen-Schumacher days, the two of them pushing each other right at the front and the others some way behind. Ted, what can you tell us?
And down at VAR, James, I can update you on what's happening to Olivier Panis. On his race car, it was gearbox problem. He's now in the spare. The only problem, of course, was that the spare was set up for Jacques Villeneuve. They're changing it now. He should get out for a couple of runs, but it's going to be tight.
It is indeed. 14 minutes to go, and we just caught the end of Montoya's third attempt, and he went faster, but not fast enough. He's still a crucial 2 and a bit tenths of a second behind the man. I think it was the man as much as the car, probably even more than the car, that put Michael Schumacher on pole. It was a Schumacher lap, wasn't it? No doubt about it. Montoya's doing his best, but still missing a quarter of a second. But it's incredible, isn't it? 1 minute and 35. You've got 95 seconds of torrid action, and you're looking for a quarter of a second in there somewhere, and it's so hard to achieve.
It's a matter of a few centimetres around a track of this length. 5.5 kilometre lap here. You're talking about probably a metre or two. There's a few hundredths or quarters of a second. There's a look at a BAR. It's Jacques Villeneuve going very slowly, just getting a bit of space for himself, presumably, before starting a run. He's just done a 1 minute 38.179, so that in fact is his fast lap. Well, fast is a relative term when applied to it, because it's 14th Villeneuve now.
So Coulthard and Ralf Schumacher now on track. Coulthard is on a slightly faster lap. Ralph's done his fastest first sector. Michael keeping a watching brief on his current pole position. We need to see the track action though, please. Ralf Schumacher has had a scruffy middle sector, lost half a second somewhere to Michael, and not working out. I wonder if there's something in that middle sector that's slowing people down. Coulthard improves to a 1:36.4, matching Raikkonen, but he's a few thousandths behind and stays 6th. Ralf Schumacher then out of turn 14, heading towards turn 15 at 190 miles an hour. And he's got to pick a braking point. A metre or two too early and you've blown it, a metre or two too late and you've blown it. That looks spot on. He saw the puff of carbon smoke coming out of the front as he pressed the brake pedal for all he was worth. Stays third, goes faster, still cannot get into the 1 minute 35s, remains 0.6 of a second behind his teammate and 3/4 of a second behind pole sitter and brother Michael.
Just under 12 minutes to go then. One more run from all the big guns and from everybody else as well. Michael Schumacher, though, on pole by just 0.2 of a second. We're into the last 10 minutes of the qualifying session for tomorrow's Malaysian Grand Prix. It's very tense and tight at the top. Michael Schumacher still just over 0.2 of a second ahead of Juan Montoya. Ralf Schumacher third, some half a second back. And then it's the second Ferrari of Rubens Barrichello, and then the two McLarens not seeming to be on the pace of Williams and Ferrari here in Malaysia in qualifying today. Everybody, though, has one more run left, and the first one to blink, as Martin would say, is Rubens Barrichello. He's gone out on track.
Barrichello out. You're watching Panis, who's had to wait for a car, wait for the spare car on his first flying lap. He's not in the Grand Prix at the moment. 8 minutes 45 seconds to go. This lap will get him in the race, somewhere up 16th or 17th, I'd guesstimate, as he goes over the line. Where is he? Panis then 18, so at least he's in. That pushes Eddie Irvine back to 20th. Irvine some 4 seconds off the pace, having a torrid afternoon. Good performances from Salo in the Toyota, who's 10th, and Frentzen in the Orange Arrows is 11th. Two very good performances there.
And you have to say a good performance also from Pedro de la Rosa, who's 15th and 5 places ahead of his teammate Eddie Irvine in what is obviously a very slow car. Louise, what can you tell us?
Well, I was just to pick up on something you just said, James, about one more lap left from all the front runners. I'm just down at the Ferrari garage at the moment. As you say, Rubens Barrichello has just gone out on track. Meanwhile, on the other side of the garage, Michael Schumacher's taken his helmet off, got out of the car and disappeared to the back of the garage. So I'm wondering whether we're actually going to see him out on the circuit again at all. Perhaps he's that confident that he's got the pole in the bag. He's not going to go out again, saving his tyres for tomorrow. What do you think?
I think it's possible. My understanding is this is a one-stop race anyway, so he's got more than enough new sets of tyres. But we've so often seen Michael where he thinks he's done his ultimate lap, doesn't want to waste the car, waste the tyres, and sits it out. That's brave with just a couple of tenths in hand over Montoya. But, you know, we saw that lap, didn't we? It looked super special. It looked absolutely on the ragged edge. Maybe Michael's thinking, I haven't got anything left. That's it. That's the best I'm going to do.
We have seen it before. We saw it a few times last year. He said that was a perfect lap. But when you do a perfect lap, there's nothing you can do to improve on it. Barrichello not on the pace of his teammate. 0.2 of a second down in the first sector as he attempts to get himself up onto the front row, because currently he's in 4th place.
So they need to leave. If Michael wants to do another run, there's 6 minutes 50 seconds to go. He needs to leave the pits with about 2 minutes 10, something like that, 2 minutes 20. So, you know, if he wants to, he's got time for another run. But he is in fact getting back in the car. So Michael is going to attempt his third run. He's still saving a set of tyres over all the other drivers. So as long as he's going down that pit lane at about 2 minutes 20 before the end of the session, he will get a hot lap in.
Yes, he's only done 2 flying runs, as Martin said, so that means he's only used 2 sets of tyres. If he goes out again, that'll be his 3rd set of tyres, and he'll have another 3 fresh ones for tomorrow's race. One of the things you always look out for with Michael Schumacher, he seems fantastically good at staving up fresh tyres, which in a race situation can often be a really big advantage. Rubens Barrichello, though, coming through to complete his lap. His middle sector has been poor. What can he do in the final sector? Is he on the front row of the grid? No, he isn't. He is still 4th, behind the 2 Williamses, who are sandwiched between the Ferraris. McLaren down in 5th and 6th, 0.3 of a second slower than Barrichello, and some way off the pace of the front runners. So not a great day for Rubens Barrichello. His qualifying jinx, if you want to call it that, from last season, where he was just unable to get himself up on the front row of the grid regularly enough, seemed to be returning to him here in Malaysia. We saw Michael Schumacher, though, flashing through the frame. He'd obviously just been to the loo and is now going out to see if you can improve on perfection. But for me, that sounds like a bit of a contradiction in terms.
Well, let's have a look. We have seen Michael completely overdrive some of his final laps in the past, but he seemed to calm that down last year. And Fisichella then, he's currently in 9th. Top Jordan runner, 1:37.5. Sato, his teammate, sorry, that is Sato. It's in 13th, 1:38.1 then for Sato. And not bad. Jordan having 9th and 13th, I think they'll be moderately satisfied with that. Barrichello's times were 1:36.1, 1:36.2 and 1:36.3. I don't think he's got much left, James.
No, it's like target shooting, isn't it? Getting closer and closer to the bullseye, but still not being able to quite nail it. Just looking at the computer in front of us, though, you can see that Montoya in the 2nd and 3rd sectors is the fastest man on the racetrack today. But the 1st sector was Michael Schumacher. So Schumacher's obviously got a really nice average lap where he's got the advantage in sector 1. But if Montoya can just find a bit more speed in that 1st sector, maybe he can get himself back. As we just draw breath and just calm ourselves down a little bit with 4 minutes to go before the final runs, we just consider that possibility.
And we caught a quick glimpse of Michael trying to get out of the way of other people's hot laps and yet keep his speed up somehow. He certainly was in the middle of an awful lot of traffic. Problem is, you let somebody through who's on their hot lap, you know that on your hot lap you're about to start, you're going to catch them somewhere, and you hope they're as kind to you as you have been to them. So Sato staying on track. This is not a particularly fast lap. Don't know if he'll go and try and finish it. It's unusual. Most drivers have been doing just one flying per run, an out, a flying and an in. And does Sato carry on? No, he does not. Yes, he does. He was so far off the apex, I thought he was going down the pit lane. But Sato over the line, that will not improve his 13th place.
9 cars on the racetrack, though, for Michael Schumacher as he tries to navigate them. Here he is, coming across the start-finish line. There's going to be a mad rush, though, a stampede behind him, and Montoya and Ralf Schumacher are all going to be involved in that. So maybe this is the right moment for Michael Schumacher to try and do the perfect lap into sector 1 then.
Yeah, he's the fastest man of anybody in this 1st sector. As you point out, James, Montoya's got him in the next 2, and there is Montoya. Full lock. There's so little lock on a Formula 1 car. Even in a wide pit lane like this, you can struggle to get out of your garage. And look at that, 2/100ths of a second faster. The fastest man again, and that's faster than himself, of course, because he is the current pole sitter. But that's the fastest run down to turn 4. Can Michael do something spectacular? And look at the traffic I was talking about. Cleared the Minardi, no problem. Sato, we're sure, will be on an in-lap ahead of him, so should hopefully get out of his way. He's quite inexperienced, of course, Sato, in Formula 1 qualifying. It's his 2nd ever qualifying. Michael has lost a few hundred somewhere. Sato does get out of the way nicely. This is where Michael is scary and was nowhere near as committed that time, was he? Nowhere near as committed through 12 and 13. And although somewhat tidier looking, it has to be said. Let's see how it works out when he gets down these next 2 straights. It didn't look like it was good enough for improving his pole position, did it?
No, Sato was in his way on the way into the corner, so a little bit of a compromise there for Michael Schumacher. But what can he do in the 3rd sector as he comes across the finish line? Oh.
Still the 2nd fastest lap of the day, though. So,
9/100ths of a second.
Slower, of course, so he did not improve on his pole. And I think that traffic slightly wrong-footed him because he didn't commit through 12 and 13 as he had done before. But Michael then having posted 1st and 2nd fastest of the day. Of course, only one of them counts. He has a fellow front row sitter in Juan Pablo Montoya. And this is Montoya's teammate, Ralf Schumacher. This is to start the flying lap. So Schumacher starts his final attempt of the afternoon. 1 minute and 2 seconds remaining. Coulthard's on track, so is Raikkonen, so is Barrichello, and Montoya too. So 5 of the top 6 are out on the racetrack.
All looking for a place on the front row of the grid. Who's going to get it? Who's going to get pole? We'll find out in, well, perhaps a couple of minutes from now. Ralf Schumacher, though, 1/10 down in the 1st sector. He's not been particularly strong through there throughout the day. Michael Schumacher's had that one really bought and paid for, but it's the middle and the final sectors that Williams do seem to have some speed on. So can Ralf Schumacher find something here to get himself on terms with his brother and indeed on terms with his teammate?
Back end stepping out a little bit on that Williams. It seems like Montoya can live with that probably better than Ralf in terms of a slightly tail-happy car, it appears, but that was super neat and tidy, but it was too neat and tidy, wasn't it? Look, he's dropped another 0.8 of a second, so Ralf Schumacher will not improve from third. That seems clear. Will he be under pressure? The session is now over. Anybody, of course, who passed the start-finish line before a locked brake there into turn 14, and usually be braking so hard there. Normally you just coast in with a bit of middle pedal there. You don't really brake hard enough to lock a wheel. So scrappy lap from Ralf. Will he be under pressure for that third spot from Barrichello or either of the two McLarens?
Just looking at the screens then, there's the checkered flag. Montoya is out there, but currently not going faster than his teammate, than Michael Schumacher. So this lap from Montoya isn't going to do the business, unfortunately, from the looks of things. There he is, and maybe he's realised it because it looks as though he's backed off.
It's absolutely Montoya then coasting, and here comes Raikkonen to finish his lap. It's not been a bad... Now, there's something going on in the middle sector. Everybody's quite slow for some reason. Barrichello's trying hard, though. Raikkonen goes over the line with his slowest run of the afternoon, 136.7. Barrichello has had a good mid-sector. Coulthard goes over the line on a 36.6. He stays 6th, so Raikkonen 5th, Coulthard 6th. Barrichello's now the only man who can make a difference. We need to see Rubens Barrichello come. Here he is in turn 15. Just a short squirt then to the start-finish line. Looked good enough, didn't it? Will he be able to split the Williams? Yes, he does. Barrichello snatches third place just at the final hurdle. Barrichello splitting the Williams of Montoya, and Ralf Schumacher to take up a grid slot in third, just line astern his teammate Michael, who's on the pole.
Terrific effort from Rubens Barrichello, just when everybody else seemed to be finding trouble, particularly in the middle part of the lap. No one seemed to be getting more speed out of their cars. Up pops Rubens Barrichello to get himself third on the grid. So Michael Schumacher has his 4th consecutive pole position of the Malaysian Grand Prix. Can he translate that into a 3rd win in a row here at Sepang? Well, there's plenty of people, including those guys there, who seriously hope not. At least they've got themselves up on the front row of the grid, though, with Juan Montoya. As you can see, it's been honours evenly spread between Bridgestone and Michelin. Nothing to choose between the tyre companies here at Sepang. The difference today, as Martin said a few minutes ago, possibly, was the performance, the sheer speed of Michael Schumacher, carrying that Ferrari round. And, well, what can you say about this man? His 44th career pole position, and a very important one indeed.
Yeah, it was a stunning lap by Michael. It was a special, totally committed lap. Had you drawing breath and wondering if he was going to go off the racetrack, and it made the difference, didn't it? And we'll have to see now. Last year here, the Michelins in the dry appeared to have a more durable tyre after they got through that initial period where they seemed to need to scrub their fronts down. But now we need to see what they can do about Michael Schumacher tomorrow.
Well, Juan Montoya said yesterday, if Michael wins this race this weekend, the championship is looking doubtful. He'll be out tomorrow to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thanks to Martin Brundle and to James Allen. A long, long way to go in the championship, despite what Juan Montoya says. Let me just confirm these standings for the Malaysian Grand Prix. Schumacher on pole in Malaysia once again. A great late dart from Barrichello, putting him behind Montoya. Ralf Schumacher in the 2nd Williams. Then the McLarens are 5 and 6. Heidfeld going pretty well on that side, and Jenson Button 8th place. That really is encouraging. Alan McNish down in 19th in the Toyota, and Eddie Irvine, is it the worst car he's ever driven? Well, 20th in the Jaguar. I guess the challengers will be slightly encouraged, Tony. It's squeezed up there in Malaysia, isn't it, compared to Australia?
It has. It's that much tighter. I also believe that Ferrari will be thinking, certainly Michael Schumacher might be pushing, say, right, we've got to think more carefully about the new car, this critical test at Barcelona after this race. Whatever happens, I want to see that new car accelerated. To a degree, the pressure was off after Australia, because the 2001 car, even though it was updated, won the race, and won the race convincingly. This is a different track. This is a very difficult track, very technical track. It's bringing out the best in the cars.
Why do you feel things are a bit closer this time round compared to a couple of weeks ago then?
Well, one critical thing was the very low temperatures were not good for Michelin in Australia. The circuit is not a demanding circuit in Australia. It's very much a stop and go and a point and squirt, if you like. This is very technical circuit, high temperatures, Michelin coming into play, a new tyre here, long sweeping curves where the tyres can really work, but also the Ferrari is working aerodynamically so well.
Williams will be very encouraged by the way Montoya went. Quickest in 2 of the 3 sectors, wasn't he, and at one stage on pole.
I would suggest, Jim, that this is very much from the power of the BMW engine there, revving up to 18,003 RPM. Not so good seemingly in the fast sectors on the downforce side of the Williams car. That's where it seems to be letting itself down. But Montoya, great effort from him. Remember last year he was all over the place here in Sepang. He had hardly any track time. He went off early in the rain. So he said, I've got lots more homework to do this year round, this time round, and he's done it.
And of course he's eyeing Michael Schumacher, and he put in a lap, and you could see how hard he was working inside that car. Absolutely vintage Michael Schumacher, this.
But this is what I was saying about the downforce of this car and how well balanced it is. It's not the fastest car in a straight line, but through those long fast curves, even through the slow curves there, like there, coming back onto the finish line, past the line, Michael Schumacher, superb. And of course then you've got the driver, the best driver in the world, who makes the difference. When you need those last couple of tenths, he's your man.
Absolutely committed there, and right at the end, in extra time really, Rubens Barrichello, pole sitter in Australia, nipped in for 3rd place.
Yeah, Rubens has been training as hard as the other drivers. Schumacher, his teammate's been at Langkawi Island there in Malaysia doing all his training in the humidity. Rubens went back to Brazil. He said, I've been playing tennis, running, cycling at all the hottest times of the day, and he's come back to Malaysia and he's in flying form, and as James was telling us, psychologically he's in good shape, Rubens, as well.
Okay, Tony, thank you very much for the moment. Now that competition, I promised you, it really is a great prize as well. To tell you all about it, here's Louise.
To kick off the new season, we have got a fantastic competition for you. Your chance to win this, a full-size replica Williams Formula One car, courtesy of F1 Racing magazine. So if you fancy watching the Grand Prix from the comfort of your own cockpit, all you have to do is answer this simple question. Who last won the World Championship for Williams? Was it A, Jacques Villeneuve, B, Michael Schumacher, or C, Nigel Mansell? If you think you know the answer, the number to call is 09069 51 50 50. That's 09069 51 50 50. Calls cost 75 pence a minute and the lines close at midnight on the 25th of April. Good luck.
Thanks, Louise. And now the point in the show when we want to hear from you. Yep, it's another look at your emails posted on the ITV F1 website. Johnny Milburn from Cambridge. I've noticed all the lower teams seem to react to a World Championship point as though they've won the lottery. Do they receive a cash reward for a point? And if so, Tony, how much?
Well, it is like winning the lottery. We don't know exactly how much because that's all information just privy of the teams in the Concord Agreement. But let's take, for example, Minardi at the last race where they got 2 very valuable World Championship points. I estimate that will earn them between 1.5 and £2 million at the end of the year when they stack up all the prize money from television money, grid money and finish money. Now, in a team that has a budget of 30 million a year, the lowest on the grid, that will cover all their travel and expenses over a whole season. No wonder they're jumping up and down and ecstatic, and I hope that answers the question.
Yes, indeed it does. The next email comes from James Kirby. It isn't, actually. It's from Matthew Leary from Dublin. Let's see what his question is. Okay, well, we were presumably get to Matthew Leary's question a little bit later on down the line. Tony, but just going back, talking about Minardi and the joy really on Paul Stoddart's face, and that travel money really is absolutely crucial, isn't it?
This is the difference between the haves and the have-nots, which will be coming up after the Malaysian Grand Prix when the teams all get together to have this meeting, because they rely on sponsorship money, they rely on the engine package, whereas the big teams like Toyota and Ferrari could almost carry on without their sponsorship. For the young teams, it's the lifeblood. They have to have it.
Yeah, I can tell you what that question was. It was, how are the drivers' numbers allocated? How do they decide who has which number on their car?
Well, what happens is the numbers 1 and 2 on the cars are allocated to the team that finished first in the World Championship at the end of the year. The rest of them have their favourites, and they're allocated accordingly.
OK, let's go back to Sepang, where David Coulthard is ready to talk to Ted Kravitz.
David, a difficult session. What were your problems?
Well, basically oversteer. That's what I've been struggling with all weekend, and I just couldn't get a balance when I could really attack the corner. And if I did carry more speed into the corner, what I gained, I would immediately lose in the exit, because when I went in the power, the rear would step out. So we were able to make a few adjustments during the session, but nothing that made a significant difference to the balance of the car. It's one of these deals when you're in these situations where if you could hook up all your best sectors, then you can go a little bit quicker. But in an ideal scenario, you go out, you know the car, and you nail all your sectors on that hot lap. So, clearly we're not making as good a use of the tyre as Williams, because we're down on where they are. So we need to take a little look at where we are in our performance. But as I said yesterday, people were getting all excited when the two silvers were at the front. It's all about qualifying, and the car felt sufficiently difficult to drive yesterday for me to not believe it was going to be the quickest car here.
So what's the plan for tomorrow to get some good points in the bag?
Stay on the track is going to be key, and the present balance of the car, that's going to be a real challenge.
Okay, thanks very much, David.
Bit of rain forecast apparently for the race in Malaysia tomorrow. Let's have a word now from Michael Schumacher, the reigning world champion, on pole once again at Sepang.
I don't know why they're so good. If you imagine how much money everybody has invested to go actually faster, and then we go a little bit slower from one year to another, it's a bit odd, honestly. But anyway, we sit here in the middle. That's what we were aiming for, and we have achieved. Everybody was sort of feeling bored after Australia and thinking it's going to be an easy season, and you see what's going to happen. I mean, things are tight, and we're going to have an interesting race tomorrow, I think.
It's certainly not going to be an easy season for Jaguar or for Eddie Irvine.
No, it isn't. I mean, it's back to the future. If they go back to the R2-D2, it's going to be a sort of droid effect, really, for them, because they've had the two chassis in Cologne with rigidity tests to see the feasibility of using the old chassis. Clearly, up to Brazil, that will give them logistical problems. But as Eddie's been saying, there is simply no downforce in the car whatsoever. But yet, Pedro de la Rosa has been faster than him in all the sessions in Malaysia so far. But they're doing, it's like a mobile test bed, that car. They're throwing parts at it as they go along through all the test sessions. It really is a hopeless situation at the moment.
Yeah, it is indeed. We spoke to him before the start there, to Jenson Button. He seemed nice and bright and cheerful, and that was reflected in his qualifying performance.
I'm very, very pleased for Jenson, and I think a lot of his British fans will be very, very pleased after the dire season he had last year. Promise is there, and he's showing his potential. And the key was, he said, this is a difficult track. He had a problem with this track last year, particularly turn 1 and 2. He said, I think I've got it sussed now. He certainly had it sussed today, and he's ahead of Trulli, which is very important. He's got to beat his teammate.
How about David Coulthard? How would you rate his chances in the Malaysian Grand Prix?
Seems to be quite low, but he's had a second place here, he's had a third place here, so if anyone can get it round, David can. It's a bit of a mystery at the moment. Aerodynamically, that car seems to be good. If anything, it's just down on power with the Mercedes engine.
Cheers, Tony. Thank you very much. We are live on ITV1 with a race at 6:45 tomorrow morning. It starts at 7 o'clock in the morning, rerun 2 o'clock, and the highlights at 11:45. There we are then. It's a familiar scenario, isn't it? Michael Schumacher on pole in Malaysia, but the hunters are significantly closer. Good morning to you all.
If you'd like to know more about Formula One, the website address, sponsored by Toyota, is itv.com/F1.